So we're returning with Shiv is what we're starting out with. We're back to looking at Dominaria. The last time we kind of covered some interrelated segments, the Cabal and where they're currently headquartered, Urbolg, and then branched off into Keld. So now we're looking at Shiv, which is a name I've heard quite a lot about, or often, but don't really know much about it, other than it's usually depicted in red cards. Baked by volcanic heat and reshaped constantly by geothermal forces, the isolated island continent of Shiv is known for its dragons, who are utterly at home among its lava flows, eruptions, and jagged peaks. Under the shadow of the Shivan dragon's wings lives a variety of mostly reptilian life. Several tribes of especially crafty goblins and the Gitu, a human culture of nomadic pyromancers and warriors. Shiv is a sprawling network of volcanic vents, the same forces that thrust the continent up out of the sea to begin with. Every part of Shiv and everything that lives there has some connection to fire and heat, and everything in Shiv must struggle to survive. Most species, either reptiles or instinct, and they often grow to enormous size. The human inhabitants of Shiv, the Gitu, survive through incredible resolve and an almost monastic devotion to the pyromantic magic that keeps their homes from burning. Shiv is home to 4 sapient species existing in uneasy harmony. The famous Shivan dragons, the human Gitu tribes, the hardy goblins, and the reclusive reptilian Vishnu have fought both against and alongside one another in the past. Today they are nominally united as a Shivan nation, ruled by a council consisting of all 4 races. None can say how long that unity will hold. Shiv has a curious combination of long memory and short attention span. On one hand, it has been continuously inhabited by the same peoples for 10 millennia. Their myths and even their histories understand and acknowledge the passage of that much time. On the other hand, daily life is so challenging that permanent progress is extremely difficult, and what is true now tends to be remembered as having always been true. The Gitu do not remember their Thrawn forebears. They do remember that they live now as Gitu have lived for thousands of years, and their history is less a succession of events than a largely unchanging tradition. This stands in sharp contrast to nations like Renalia, whose histories recount specific people and deeds progressing over a certain number of centuries since a known foundation. Indigenous life on Shiv is almost exclusively reptilian or insectile. Dragons and Vyashino are sentient reptilian species native to the continent, while enormous lizards and worms live in the wild. Reptiles are perfectly suited to surviving on Shiv. The deserts, volcanoes, and hot springs, in all their blistering heat, make excellent habitats. The only mammalian species with any major presence in Shiv are the goblins and humans, both of which can thrive nearly anywhere. The human Gitu are descended from Thrawn humans who immigrated to Shiv millennia ago, though this is unknown even to them. Gitu camps are quick to build, quick to take down, and designed to be very durable in the face of Shiv's harshest elements. They can be differentiated from Vyashino structures at a glance over great distances due to the distinctive cloth wrappings and curved tops of their tents. The Gitu are best known for their pyromancy and their crafting of magical artifacts, and they are the most talented smiths of Thrawn steel in all of Dominaria. Dragons are at the top of the food chain and grow to particularly large sizes here. The dragons of Shiv spent centuries in hiding after the devastation of the invasion, but following the Great Mending and the resurgence of all mana, the dragons have taken flight once more. Along the coast, fire-breathing drakes are quite common and regarded with similar respect. Goblins are everywhere in Shiv. The introduction of the Mog bloodline from Wrath has caused some evolutionary changes over the last 3 centuries, but goblins remain largely the same species in spite of their differing appearance. They value independent fortifications, often using caverns and mountain passages to keep safe from larger species and armies. Goblins were persecuted for most of their history. That began to change when goblin workers became integral to working the Shivan mana rig and creating the power stones that fueled Urza's war efforts. The continent's restoration and the creation of the Shivan nation have lifted them up as a species. Goblins have an equal seat at the table among dragons, Vyashino, and the Gitu in the modern Shivan nation. The Vyashino are humanoid lizards that claim to be descended from dragons. Whether or not this is true, they have always been close with the dragons, though that relationship has been hostile as often as friendly. They suffered greatly during the invasion and the Rift era that followed. Modern Vyashino live almost exclusively in simple camps, often consisting of just a handful of huts which can disappear in minutes should the Vyashino decide to mobilize. As harsh as the desert may be, the Vyashino are suited to living in it, relying on their sand swimming for transportation and tactical advantage. Like many cultures, the people of Shiv have their own myth about how they and their land came to be. Through millennia of cultural contact, the Vyashino and the Gitu came to tell very similar stories about the origin of Shiv, though their accounts differ as to who was created first. The Gitu call their saga the First Eruption. Reptilian metaphors dominate this creation myth, as even the Gitu can plainly see that they are not like most of Shiv's native life. In the first part of the story, Shiv hatches from an egg, from a shell of stone around a yolk of flame, then sheds its scales regularly in eruptions and basks in the heat of primordial Dominaria. The Shiv comes to be, peopled by its children, the Gitu, the tale says, were the children of fire, the dragons were born of air, and the Vyashino arose from the earth. The first eruption contains no inkling of the true Thrawn origins of the Mana Rig and the Gitu, though it does speak of long ago unity among the 4 nations. The myth suggests Shiv itself punished them for quarreling, knowing that their shared hardship would drive them together. Traditional versions of the story have put emphasis on the hardship and enmity, but current retellings of the story suggest that the still young Shivan nation is the desired result of that hardship, a new and stronger alliance among Shiv's peoples. The humans of Shiv live in encampments scattered across the continent, packing up entire camps and moving as land changes around beneath them. Above all else, the Gitu value community and efficiency, working together toward common goals at all times. Civil conflicts and political arguments are incredibly rare among them. Their singularity of purpose is their defining feature. When discord does occur, the Gitu turn to their elders to decide the course. The Gitu revere dragons, but they also respect them as dangerous. They traditionally regard goblins as pests. The relationship with the Vishino is more complex. They are sometimes allies, sometimes enemies, but almost always rivals. Most Gitu are lean and muscular, with tan skin and sharp facial features. They aren't impoverished, but the exertion of living on Shiv and their survivalist approach to eating keeps them particularly athletic. Facial hair is uncommon, as the heat makes it uncomfortable, but some elders grow beards as sign of their seniority. Gitu tend to grow their hair long, but often bind it tightly or tuck it into a headdress. Their garb consists of cloth layers, often mixing white and tan to help repel this heat of the sun. The cloth is essential for protecting against the desert sand and can provide minor protection from rocks and knives. Leather straps and some more colorful fabrics serve to bind their clothing in place while indicating their class. Warriors are known for wearing bright red tunics, while mages, artificers, favor elements of blue. Civilians avoid these colors, and the desert wear is typically wholly tan and brown. While the Gitu value community and peace, they understand that some conflicts can be resolved only with violence. Every young Gitu is taught basic skills as an adolescent just to be able to survive. But those who display a talent are trained as Gitu warriors. They are armed, carrying a number of visible and concealed weapons. It's not unusual for them to customize their arsenals, as some go as far as to personally forge or shape every weapon they carry. This can make encountering one unpredictable. They rarely use shields, preferring to keep a hand free from maneuvering or accessing a hidden weapon. Spellcasting is a basic skill that most Gitu were taught and tested for while young. Not every Gitu proves capable of wielding magic, but those that do are taught a host of basic skills that ease survival on the sands. Magical education focuses on turning to magic defensively rather than relying on it to initiate conflicts. However, once a battle is underway, Gitu magic can be deadly. In contrast to more primal pyromantic traditions, the Gitu magical tradition is exacting, almost monastic. Gitu wizards use their voices and physical movements as they channel mana. Most of their spells use fire to augment weapons or manipulate the battlefield. Some spells incorporate water or sand. Many Gitu mages can summon wind across the desert, creating sandstorms long enough to deter any army. Some particularly intense spells are taught carefully. Many of these threaten to kill the user. Such spells often involve self-immolation or detonation, and are typically only taught to a particularly adept class of Gitu. The Gitu are famed across Dominaria for their skill in crafting magical and mechanical artifacts. Most of this renown stems from the work of Joyra. The contemporary Gitu are not shy from the high expectations. The artistry is unparalleled. Even among the artificers of Tularia and the smiths of Bogarden, most Gitu are descended from Thrawn, a race of humans who invented some of the most advanced Dominaria has ever seen. While these efforts were mostly lost to history, ancestors of the Gitu depended upon their craft for survival during their early years on the sands. Even the most basic artificer skills led the to improvise weapons, shelters, and tools for collecting water, essential support for the day-to-day life of any Gitu. Aided by natural gifts of strength and size, as well as a deep connection to red mana, dragons have been the dominant species on Shiv since the mountainous land first pushed up from the ocean depths. They are inherently magical, channeling mana to spew fire or magma from their mouths, and those that choose to study more formal methods naturally excel at other uses of red mana. Their strength and longevity are likewise enhanced by their magical nature. Shivan dragons are as intelligent as humans and have much more time to build up knowledge and experience. But most have no interest in typical human expressions of intelligence and culture. These are all just different ways to compensate for not being an enormous flying, fire-breathing reptile. Hatchling dragons are only a few feet long, but they grow quickly and can reach enormous size. Despite their size, dragons are known for their speed. They can cover ground very rapidly and vault into the sky at a moment's notice, escaping an archer's reach in seconds. Their movement is graceful and rarely shakes the ground beneath them, but the sound of their wing beats can carry for hundreds of feet. Shivan dragons' fine scales in varying shades of red and gold coat their skin like close-fitting chainmail. As the dragons age, their scales grow paler and bleach beneath the desert sun. Their faces often feature large horns or tusks. It's unusual for Shivan dragons to wear anything that would be considered clothing, though they do occasionally adorn themselves with ornamental spoils and treasure. Dragons are apex predators, and no dragon on Shiv would ever flee combat. They might oppose the use of violence or offer other solutions, but presented with a contest, the dragon always competes. From ancient times beginning, with the rise of primevals, dragons have demonstrated an arrogance and strong will that proved dangerous to the entire plane and created animosity between them and other races. When the Shivan dragons were weakened during the Rift Era, the other races of Shiv kept up a sustained assault to keep the dragons from returning to positions of great power. When the Mending restored the dragons access to mana, the other races feared retribution, but Joya and Dargaz convinced the other dragons that unity with other races would serve the good of the plane. Now the dragons are testing the waters of interspecies cooperation as full members of the Shivan nation, trusting Dargaz as their primary representative, even though he spent a decade being raised by the Gitu. Dragons are bound together in broods. The term once indicated a familiar relationship, but the direct devastation of the invasion severed many ties and forced unrelated dragons together in hiding. The most senior member of these disparate groups were called broodlords and led the groups based on their wisdom and experience. Following the Mending and the establishment of the Shivan nation, Dargaz honored the broodlords with a high status comparable to elected representatives of Shiv's other peoples. Any dragon broodlord may bring concerns or grievances before the ruling council and receive due consideration. Historically, the strongest of the Shivan dragons bore the title Champion of Shiv. The champion's purpose was to lead the dragons in battle and guide them in peace. The most notable champions of Shiv were the first reincarnation of Ramidar and Rarik's Bladewing, but there have been many others. In the modern era, Shiv's champion is considered an exemplar, a source of practical and moral guidance. Rivernabai's is actually due to the failures of his previous incarnation. Holds influence over the broodlords but does not command them. In essence, he envisions the champion of Shiv as a political representative for the Shivan dragons rather than a commander or tyrant. The only faction dragons to oppose the nation's formation, the Bladewings, are relatives and descendants of Rarik's Bladewing, former champion of Shiv. As such, they are afforded grudging respect despite their often unconventional views. They perceive themselves to be the rightful heirs of Shiv's draconic leadership and find the very idea of equality among races insulting. The powerful should rule the weak, they believe, and the weak should rule nothing. The Bladewings agree to support the nation only because they need help in their efforts to destroy the Cabal. In secret, they hope to one day overthrow this government. All they need is for Dargaz to make a misstep that costs him the dragon's loyalty, and his council will become vulnerable to a coup. Beric's Bladewing and her mate Kyrox are the leaders of this brood. Their child Terox is pride of the xenophobic brood. He allows Daragaz to lead the dragons for now, but he secretly hopes to one day capitalize on a mistake and seize control. Shivan goblins are unique in their history of working and maintaining the Shivan mana rig, and they tend to have a greater aptitude with machines and metals than their cousins elsewhere. With their ramshackle gear, low linguistic aptitude, and provincial outlook, goblins often seem stupid to outsiders. When Shiv, more than in most places, those who deal with them have come to realize that there's very cunning underlying all that. And that some especially clever goblins play the role of buffoon on purpose. Goblins are small humanoids with light green skin, sometimes yellow or brown. They can vary in height, but generally are 3 to 4 feet. Intermingling with the Mog goblins of Wrath that were brought to Dominaria during the overlay has created a hybrid species combining the physical features of both strains. Shivan goblins were once slaves of the Thrawn, forced to work in the mana rig's most cramped chambers to forge power stones. This history has created a powerful imprint on the cultural memory of the species, and in the centuries following the fall of Thrawn, goblins turned to the rig as a holy ground, viewing the forge as a religious relic. This put them into direct conflict with the Viashino, who came to control it. After centuries of skirmishes, the goblins managed to sneak into the rig's cramped interior and make a home there, leeching the warmth of the forge and mountains while remaining hidden. Goblin tribes are always led by a singular goblin, chosen based on experience and contests of strength. Though any goblin may call the chieftain's authority into question, most goblins respect the rule of their chieftain until they're dead or crippled, choosing to wait out a change rather than initiate a coup. Goblin chieftains often wear clothing as an indicator of their status, often crude emulation of human fashions, though whether in mockery or aspiration, none but the chieftains can say for sure. Goblins have spent eons at the bottom of the totem pole among the cultures of Shivs, but this has given them a unique perspective. They know what it's like to be treated like a goblin. Goblins are quick to protest an unequal distribution of power when they see it forming. The Viashino are a tenacious lizard-like people living in clans across the sands of Shiv. They have had historically tense relationships with the Gitu and have been actively hostile towards goblins. In this new age, they are making an effort to overcome their past animosities. The Viashino were hit by the invasion just as hard as the dragons, losing over 3/4 of their population and seeing their clans scattered. They're often quick to anger but don't consider violence significant. It's just how they express disagreement. They're tall, looming a foot or two over most humans, and carrying a lot of muscle. They claim to be descended from dragons and look very much like a wingless dragon hybrid. Their coloration is most often green, brown, or yellow. Shiv and Viashino wear little clothing, focusing on the practical leather straps and harnesses for holding weapons and supplies. Viashino who work in the mana rig wear heavier clothing to protect themselves. One reason the Viashino dress light is that cloth hinders their ability to sand swim through the desert. Viashino can dive beneath the surface of the desert and weave through it, undulating like a snake and traversing great distances at speed. In the desert, the Viashino are virtually unbeatable. Living clans led by a single chieftain, ancient magical traditions have all but died out. They focused heavily on magic that manipulated sand. In the modern era, Viashino who display magical talent are often trained in pyromancy, or else learn artificer traditions akin to the Gito, sharing common roots in their work together in the mana rig. Combination of ecological hazards, geographical isolation, and insular habitats have kept Shiv at the periphery of Dominaria's history until recently. The reptile cultures of the continent favor oral traditions, and through the tumult of the centuries, many of their histories and customs have been lost. Among humans, the Gitu's nomadic nature has left much of their history to be told by individual artifacts, and magical knowledge may be passed from generation to generation. The earliest history of Shiv is shrouded. Encountered thousands of years ago, the continent was the seat of power for one of the primeval dragons. Sometimes after the dragon was imprisoned in a volcano, the technologically advanced Thrawn civilization built an industrial facility in Shiv's wastelands, where the local goblins were enlisted to manufacture power stones and Thrawn steel. The Shivan Mana Rig was the only known outpost of the Thrawn Empire to survive the Civil War and the Empire's ensuing decline. With its technology intact, Shiv's distance from the other continents of the world left it insulated from the cataclysmic events of the next 8,000 years, including the Silex Blast and the Ice Age. The Thrawn abandoned their rig into the hands of the Viashino, who used it to forge weapons. The descendants of the Thrawn became the Gitu tribes, though they have mostly forgotten their origins. The goblins who once worked in the Mana Rig were released into the mountains, where their knowledge of the rig transformed over the centuries into a pseudo-religion that regarded the facility as holy ground. Shiv re-entered the political landscape when the planeswalker Urza found the Mana Rig and enlisted the Viashino's help in forging Thrawn steel weapons to be used against Phyrexia. With guidance from the Gitu artifact, Joyra, Karn, and Teferi, Shiv's four races were united in common purpose. Urza used the Mana Rig to build implements of war, gliders, power suits, and skyships, most notably the Weatherlight, which combined Thrawn steel and living wood from Yavimaya. Over the course of centuries, Shiv helped prepare Dominaria for war, but once the actual invasion began, the continent's role in the conflict was brief. Joyra and Teferi phased Shiv out of time until the Phyrexians were defeated. More than 3/4 of the continent's habitable area disappeared, taking nearly all of the Gitu, Goblin, and Viashino civilians out of harm's way. What remained, though, was brought to the brink of total ruin as resources grew scarce among the survivors. Many Viashino and Goblins became desert marauders, and the few Gitu that remained were hardened into warriors who forged weapons instead of tools. Teferi and Joyra came back to Dominaria in time to shepherd Shiv's safe return to the Time Spring. Teferi sacrificed his spark in order to close the rift where Shiv had stood and make the land whole once more. The Shivan cultures were anything but united. The mercenary Viashino and Goblins and the militaristic Gitu of the day were suddenly face to face with the civilian families of their own ancestors. As the contemporary inhabitants of Shiv explored the returned continent, they stumbled upon its most important site, the remaining portion of the Mana Rig, which quickly became a focus for content. Joyra discovered the chaos when she returned, and she negotiated a truce that returned control of the Mana Rig to the Gitu. Joyra and a team of Gitu were able to mostly repair the rig and once again began turning out Thrawn steel. Though the manufacture of new power stones remained a contentious issue both technically and politically. Respected by Shivans of all kind, but reluctant to become a leader, Joyra sought to create a political body that represented all of Shiv, and she was inspired when she discovered a dragon living among the Gitu. Leading the Shiva nation, a council of 8 elders, 2 of each race, preside over matters of state brought to them by representatives of every tribe. Julia herself was elected to the council, but she does not occupy its seat. It's important for her that the people of Shiv decide their own future, unburdened by the past. The Council of Shiv and Nation is governed successfully with the support of its people, leading to an era of growth and cooperation among the cultures of Shiv. Kind of feels like it's kind of out of order from how you would expect it, with maybe the broad history and the geography first, and then the focus in on the different groups. Shiv is, because a lot of this seems to have kind of been covered earlier. Shiv is a small continent in the center of the Great Ocean, far to the east of the Burning Isles and northeast of Jumeirah. The calderas and vents of huge submerged volcanoes have formed a ring of smaller islands around it. Within this ring, Dominaria's largest coral reef encircles most of the continent, hindering any sea travel. Moving within the radius of coral is difficult, as the water there approaches near boiling temperatures. While some beaches exist, most of the coastline consists of unstable rock and earth formations created by centuries of tectonic shifts. While distance alone would be enough to discourage Dominarians from sailing to Shiv, the continent also happens to be among the most naturally hostile landmasses on the plain. The swirling clouds of ash and vapor formed by Shiv's numerous active volcanoes make the continent visible from miles away in every direction. These volcanoes are constantly on the cusp of eruption. A natural phenomenon fueled by Shiv's tectonic instability. Stretches of desert and acidic soil separate Shiv's volcanic mountain ranges from one another and make travel by land dangerous. The difficulty in reaching Shiv and the desolation found within its interior long ago earned it a reputation as a scorched wasteland. The inhabitants wear this judgment proudly, regarding outsiders too weak to brave what they endure every day. That said, the bold mariners and merchant of Benalius Halfdeniz have made their way to the coast of Shiv and established a port. A large number of Gitu have been lingering at the outskirts of Alric's Landing and enjoy the fruits of trade with the wider world. Well, that section, I think it was a bit longer than most, since you're covering a lot of groups. We're a bit short on time, but we might be able to get through this, hopefully. Few outsiders dare to venture into the vast land of Llanowar, where huge old-growth trees tower a few thousand feet into the air. Among the trees live the fierce llanowar elves, whose appearance of savagery and reputation of xenophobic hostility are enough to keep most intruders away from even the shadow of the forest. But the reality is that the llanowar are reclusive people, and careful visitors can enter and leave the forest without ever seeing its inhabitants. When the llanowar elves are seen, it's because they wish to be, often to the intruder's detriment. The most well-known cultural feature of the llanowar is a reclusiveness that borders of xenophobia. The degree and harshness of this distrust has varied throughout history and still vary widely among the different societies of Llanowar. Some elves conduct cautious trade at carefully patrolled border sites, while others harshly punish transgression of their unwritten laws. This has earned the forest and its people a fearsome reputation, one that most Llanowar are very happy to maintain. Llanowar are long-lived even from elves, and those avoid premature death can easily live to be 1,000 years old. These elves are revered elders and their personal memories often outstrip the accuracy and depth of human historical accounts. But there are fewer such individuals in Llanowar today than at any other point, thanks to the devastation brought about by the invasion and the brutal years that followed. Half of Llanowar's current population consists of adolescents aged 60 years or below, and young elves just coming into their own as adults. This represents a shocking shift, one that Llanowar society is still absorbing. The metaphysical lives of Llanowar elves are a curious mix. Their druidic tradition is deeply in touch with the land and wholly devoted to Gaia, the dominarian nature goddess. For most elves, though firm and even ruthless in defense of their home, are deeply pragmatic, caring much more about how to live in nature than about feeling in tune with it. Some believe that the latter flows from the former. Others simply aren't concerned about the latter at all. I don't think there's that much new there. The elves of Llanowar live in 7 kingdoms called Elfheims. The former 8th was destroyed in the invasion, and its survivors were adopted into Kelfey. The borders between the Elfheims are marked in both horizontal and vertical space, with overlapping kingdoms occupying the different layers of the forest. The forest floor, the understory, and the canopy and emergent layer. Because of these overlapping regions, a map of the Elfheims territories would be close to unreadable. The names of the Elfheims apply to both regions and to the elves that live there, so the elves of Riashil are called the Riashil elves. The gentle but reclusive Riashil settle in sunlit glens and the sparser areas around the edges of the forest floor. They build villages in the open spaces of the wood. Since lumber is always at a premium, their homes tend to be dug out of the ground. It's often impossibly difficult for outsiders to spot Riashil settlement short of walking over a house and falling through its roof. The Riashil govern themselves through small-scale democracy. When a decision must be made, each village appoints a representative who travels to a council. The antagonistic Saprion stalk through the tangles of fern, moss, and fungus on the floor in the shadowy heart of the wood. The Saprion were devastated by the invasion. The ruling clans slaughtered, their lands destroyed. The modern inheritors have become even tougher and less compromising, roving the woods in nomadic bands. Much of Llanowar's fearsome reputation has been earned and maintained by the Saprion. They're nomadic, hierarchical, and militistic. Groups of Saprion do not coordinate well, and they frequently fight among themselves. The Lordala reside on the shadowy understory layer of the forest, forming a network of highways stretching from one end of Llanowar to the other. The dwellings are hollows grown within living greenwood, shaped by magic into weatherproof, aesthetically pleasing designs. Running light-footed along thick branches and bridges of vines, Lordala couriers pass news and packages across the forest without ever touching the ground. The canopy is home to the most diverse forms of life in Llanowar. Thousands of insect and symbiotic plant species exist here and nowhere else. At this height, tree trunks and branches are slim and flexible. They sway slowly in the breeze. This gentle motion has become a guiding principle to the existence of Kelfey. The search for stability in a swaying tree top in an age of turmoil or in a life of distress is to them a fruitless endeavor. The Basifem inhabit the crowns of the oldest and tallest emergent layer of trees, a species known as stone root. The Basafim are a hardy breed apart, known for their muscular physiques and indifference to inclement weather. Literally above the other elfheims and rarely interacting with any but their own kin, Basafim have a tendency to grow proud and elitist. Rather than remain aloof, however, they see it as their duty to aid the rest of Llanowar. Hedressel is one of the two elfheims that extends through all 4 layers, but is defined by its geographic location as other races understand it. Confined to the southwest portion of the forest, Hedressel is the holy land of Llanowar's druidic orders, secretive and zealously guarded. Beyond a certain line, known by instinct to the elves, non-elves are considered trespassers and punished by death. A druid that enters Hedressel is not permitted to leave again for a full year. Spilling blood on the soil is considered a sacred act. This is not to say the Hedressel are pacifists, non-elves who are caught trespassing. Rudok, the other horizontally bounded elfheim, occupying the eastern edge of the forest, is an outward-looking mercantile elfheim of scattered city-states along navigable rivers and lakes, whose culture has been strongly influenced by intermarriage with nearby human settlements. Non-elven merchants from other lands, unwelcome elsewhere, sell their wares at Rudok. Rudok then trade these foreign goods to the other elfheims in exchange for flora and fauna from the depths of the forest. The Rudok themselves have embraced human society in a very literal sense. A handful of ancient noble families have long ruled Rudok in a dynastic hierarchy, with inheritance passed from current ruler to the eldest child. The long lives of Llanowar elves mean that rulership is extremely stable. Queen Trina had ruled for over 6 centuries when she died in the invasion. Trina's half-elf daughter now rules. At nearly 400 years old, Elenil is not expected to live beyond the next century. From the palace at the capital, Scoria, a living wooden structure grown over centuries as a bridge across the Selindine River, she oversees a markedly more fluid order than her mother, adapting to the changing realities of the Mending era. As Llanowar elves sustain themselves through hunting and gathering, but a few elfheim practices more organized agriculture. Cavu are reptilian creatures that are very ancient or a relatively recent creation on Dominaria. They emerge from the ground either awakening or springing fully formed into being to defend against the invasion. The Llanowar elves breed them to fulfill a variety of roles, believing that the Cavu was Goddess Gaia's means of intervening in Dominaria's defense. The close relationship between elves and Cavu is a constant reminder of Gaia's beneficence. Sorry, we're running short on time. I'm gonna skip that. It doesn't seem that much more than we didn't hear already. There's a tendency among outsiders to assume that the druids of Llanowar are uniquely religious in nature. This is incorrect. As a whole, they are more akin to a professional elven philosophical class in the way that nobles of other lands serve as a warrior class. Druidic orders fill a variety of social roles throughout Llanowar. Each order has its own focus. Some orders consist of poets, bards, and historians who collect and preserve the lore of Llanowar and its peoples for future generations. Others make up astronomers, mathematicians, and navigators who use their esoteric knowledge to predict weather and astronomical events. Most importantly, the druids serve as the judicial system in every Elfhame. When someone is accused of a crime, it is the druids who both investigate and judge. They decide the accused merit's death. The druids are required to witness the execution in the role of the Eyes of Gaia, proving that the goddess has witnessed that justice has been done. All druidic lore is memorized and passed along orally. Although literacy and the ability to write is nearly universal among the druids, this is to prevent outsiders from learning anything they should not. Whereas the elves of Yavimaya revere Gaia, the goddess of light, Llanowar have historically worshipped Freylies. They acknowledge the existence and divinity of Gaia. It is difficult to deny, particularly given that Molino resides in Llanowar as a manifestation of her will, but they believe Freylies was equally divine and that she took an interest in elvenkind generally and the Llanowar specifically. Freylies was a planeswalker, half-elf in origin. She guided and protected elven communities throughout Dominaria's history, but the first Finhome and Terracer, then in Llanowar, then Sky Shroud. In Keld, she sacrificed her life during the Mending to seal one of the time rifts, destroying reality, leaving Llanowar without their goddess. Since Freyli's death, the elves of Llanowar have slowly accepted the worship of Gaia. Most believe that Freylis was an avatar or aspect of Gaia, and some still pray to her, but they are just as likely these days to pray directly to Gaia. Since the Rift Crisis, Molimo has rested in a shadowy crook of the great tree, Pendelhaven, communing with Llanowar, focusing all his powers on rejuvenating the woods. His reason Llanowar was among the first areas of Dominaria to recover, has only spoken aloud once since sitting down, granting Joya permission to take living greenwood to repair the Weatherlight's Hall. Having remained dormant for centuries, Molimo's humanoid shell is overgrown with moss, vines, and flowers. Elves still sometimes come to speak to him, seeking guidance. Many claim to have heard a voice in their minds, but this is a personal experience and must be taken as a matter of faith. So, we'll end here today. We'll start with Yavimaya next time. The other sort of elven enclave, and hopefully it looks like we'll be able to finish, but that'll be it for today. Most likely no stream later tonight, and you know what, tomorrow we'll probably go ahead and try and finish this, and then we'll start on the next Mothership book on Saturday.